Good evening, everyone, and welcome to East West Wednesdays. My name is Snehal Desai, and I'm the producing artistic director of East West Players, and we're so glad that you could join us tonight. As we continue working our way through the COVID-19 pandemic, East West Players remains committed to its mission of both raising the visibility of the Asian American experience and being a voice for the API community, as well as developing artists of color through programs such as this. We are looking to bring you online content that both amplifies the work we do and also supplements our artistic work. We hope you will join us this and every Wednesday at 5 p.m. for interesting conversations, panels, and other short events and readings. Tonight's show is brought to you by Disney ABC Television and CBS Entertainment Diversity and Inclusion. Before we turn to our panel of leading Asian American comics, I first want to actually turn things over to our board member, May Lee, who is also host of The May Lee Show. May had a Zoom interview with two amazing artists who also, as is the Asian way, happen to be doctors. Meena Makhijani and Roy Vongtama. Roy, who was actually in our production of Man of God as the pastor. So if you saw that, you saw Roy on stage. So they are working on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we wanted to talk about what their experiences were like and what are things that they wanted to share based on their experiences. So I'm going to turn things over to May first.
Thanks, Snehal. Well, today I am going to be talking to two amazing individuals who are on the front lines. They're both doctors, and we know what these doctors are doing during this crisis, and we cannot thank these people enough. So I'm so happy that I'm going to be able to talk to two of them. I'm going to introduce Meena Makhijani. She is a geriatrician. She's currently Chief of Staff of the Motion Picture and Television Hospital and a physician with UCLA. Meena, hi, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you. All right, and also Dr. Roy Vongtama. He is a radiation oncologist. He's affiliated to various hospitals, including UCLA Medical Center. He's also an actor, writer, and producer, and some of you at East West Players might recognize him because he was in the world premiere of Man of God, which I saw, and you were fantastic, Roy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, thank you.
Listen, let's talk about the issue at hand, which obviously is the COVID-19 crisis. And like I was saying before, you know, the doctors, nurses, you know, medical workers, you have been the absolute superheroes in all of this. But it's been devastating also for you. Meena, let me start with you because you posted something that was so heart-wrenching about your own experience dealing with recruitment. And many of them are elderly because that is your specialty. And it must just be devastating, you know, for you to have to deal with this day in and day out. Tell me what it's been like for you.
Right, yeah, it's definitely been really devastating when we're seeing just these large numbers at my nursing home where I work of people being infected with COVID. And as we know, elderly people are just so susceptible. So it's been something that we were preparing for since the beginning of March, knowing very well that it really could hit us, but unfortunately it did, despite all the precautions we took here. And so to see our patients getting sick, many of them I know, some I don't know, but just the way they suffer with this disease is just really, really heartbreaking. And to me, you know, one part is that there's really not that much we can do in terms of medical treatment. There is no real treatment at this point. And so that's something where I feel like I'm failing them in a way. There's not that much I can do from the medical standpoint. All I can do is try to be there for them, give them kind of supportive measures, as we call them, and just try to reassure them. As the post you're talking about, I mentioned that one lady, I was just rubbing her back because she said that made her feel better, and literally that's all I could offer her. And to me, really the most devastating part of all of this is that, especially for those patients who end up dying from COVID, they are alone. Their families are not allowed to visit. That's pretty much the standard throughout the country at hospitals and nursing homes, that visitors are not allowed just because of the risk to themselves too. So that's the real tragedy in all this, is that people, all of us are alone, but especially those who are stricken with the disease and dying are truly alone.
That is probably the most heartbreaking part of this, because no one can come see their loved ones.
Right.
knowing that they're not going to, last for much longer, and therefore it's like, God, that I can't even imagine going through something like that. So you guys, the doctors and the nurses, are the ones who are providing that last minute of comfort to these people.
Right. Yes. I mean, and we're doing our best to do that, but we know, nothing replaces the family. And even though definitely the staff is facilitating video visits and that sort of thing, but of course that doesn't take the place of the in-person, bedside
Right.
comfort hugs. Yeah.
Hey, Roy, let me turn to you now. So you have also been working nonstop, dealing with this crisis. So what has been the most shocking or surprising, both good and bad for you going through this whole ordeal as a doctor? But honestly, you guys are human beings too. You guys have emotions, you have feelings, you're exhausted. I mean, tell me what it's been like for you.
Yeah, obviously, Dr. Makhijani's had a very personal experience. One thing I don't think people really understand from the news reports is how different hospitals really are from what doctors experience. Because a hospital actually is a place, is a business. It's not run by doctors. It's run by administrators and business people. So there is a difference. Like I'm on staff at 10 hospitals, and every single hospital has a different level of how serious they've been taking COVID-19. So as a doctor walking in, sometimes they're like, "Oh, we don't need masks here." And the next hospital is like, "We're going to check your temperature. We're going to have you in a mask. Everybody's in a mask." And
Wow.
so, the one that makes you feel comfortable is the one who's trying to take care of the physician. And the one that doesn't make you feel comfortable is the one that's looking out for themselves, because there is a business side to it. If you're known as a COVID hospital, that's not a good thing to be known as from a business standpoint. So even though there's what we're dealing with as physicians, there's another added stress in that we don't necessarily control the environment we're working in. So that's something maybe people listening don't really understand.
That's really an interesting point because we only hear about, the main stories that come out on the news, and you think
Yeah.
that's the case in every hospital. But
No,
it's so interesting to hear that there's so many different ways in which different hospitals are functioning, and maybe
exactly.
one's more intense and one, is lighter or whatever. So, but let me ask you both, because this has been the issue since the beginning, right? The lack of supplies, the lack of PPEs, the lack of masks. I mean, and so has that gotten better for you, or like you're saying, Roy, it
Mhm.
just depends on the hospital? I mean, tell me the situation that you guys are facing on a day-to-day basis now versus before. Meena, why don't you start?
Right. So it's definitely getting a little better. Even just today, I'm on the meetings with the administration of my facility, and we heard that we are getting another shipment in, which was really reassuring. A shipment of masks and gowns. Gowns for us have been much more limited in supply than masks, but both of them are completely critical. So it's definitely been an issue all these weeks that we've had positive cases of trying to sort of dole out the supplies, project what we're going to need based on how many patients, how many employees, how many days. We really have to keep projecting and updating those numbers constantly. But what I found, which again from the news, we hear that almost like hospitals are withholding PPE from patients. I don't think that's necessarily the case in a lot of situations. I don't know about every hospital. Like Roy said, they all have different administrators and et cetera, and they're all being run a little differently. But what I'm finding here is it's really a supply chain issue. So a lot of supplies of PPE are being routed to hospitals, are being routed to cities that are hit harder. So even though in Los Angeles we're one of the harder hit cities, still here things would go to a hospital over a nursing home, even though we have active critical cases. And so that's been something that's such a challenge to try to deal with, because we put in orders and they get canceled. That kind of thing has been happening. Mhm.
Okay. And Roy, what have you seen then in terms of the supplies?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said before too. I mean, every hospital was preparing for the surge in cases, so a lot of them are holding back their supply. And in terms of what's been, as far as my own experience, it got better as time went on, because one thing that's good about hospitals is that they do let departments, the physicians run their own ship at some level a lot of times. And the one I was in, we were able to set our own protocol, and it was different than the hospital's general protocol. So we made it a lot safer for our staff and the patients than maybe the hospital was actually looking to do from their basic protocol. So now that once we started to understand what effective safety procedures and PPE were, then we were able to make a protocol so we could deal with every patient that way. Like, for example, I don't see patients personally unless they really need to be seen now, where initially we're trying to see them the way we were always seeing them, in person, in the room, up close, doing an exam. And then it shifted to, okay, let's talk to them on the phone mostly, and right before they need treatment, come in, do a very quick exam. Only I'll see them, full gown with mask, gloves. So then you're like, okay, I'm only in there, and it's good for the patient, especially cancer patients. They're at 2 to 5 times higher likelihood of having a serious illness. So they know it's good for them. We know it's good for us. And we were making a lot of changes to the way we were treating, trying to get things done quicker and faster.
Right. So as time has gone on, you guys have obviously gotten better, more knowledgeable. I mean, it's like, the situation I just described it, it's like we were building a plane as it was taking off.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many unknowns about this disease and how it worked and spread and how people were affected. And so it really is like this quick study that everybody's been going through.
Yeah.
Right. I was saying I feel like I'm in medical school again, because I'm just constantly studying and trying to learn about the disease, and we're coming up with procedures and protocols every single day. Like you said, there's just so much coming out constantly.
Let's talk about sort of your personal experiences in terms of emotionally, because I do get concerned about people who are on the front lines, because you're seeing so much and you're experiencing things that maybe you've actually never experienced even as a doctor. It takes an emotional toll, I'm sure. But there's also got to be the fear that you yourselves are in danger. Unfortunately, we have heard about a lot of medical personnel getting sick and some, passing away. So is that something that you think about on a daily basis, or is that something you have to compartmentalize?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's a great question. I think both, in terms of I think about it, but then I also have to compartmentalize when I'm going into work, because I don't want that to be affecting my care for the patients, or I don't want that to just be overwhelming me. So it's certainly something I think about, but more in the sense, in terms of me getting sick, in terms of being around others. So I'm not around anybody really except my coworkers and my patients. So I don't see my parents because of potential risks to them. I don't see friends. I live alone. So certainly it's been stressful for me, because I'm coming from the stressful situation and then I go home alone. I don't have anybody to really kind of, decompress with, but certainly with technology, et cetera, that certainly helps. And so I've definitely been trying to connect with people that way, as well as, find other outlets, like the arts, incredibly important.
Right.
Yes. So
Exactly. We're all trying to find different ways to get our culture and the arts, since we can't go to live theater anymore.
exactly. Right. So like even this, what East West Players is doing, I think is fantastic, to really, find another outlet for their creative talents and resources. So like that, I really applaud them for doing that, and can't wait to get back to the theater to see their next production. But for me, I play music and I'm a dancer, so that's really been something I've been continuing to do during this, even collaborating with some international projects, all through, through distance formats. But that's been tremendously helpful for me. But you're right, it's been really, really difficult. There was a doctor in New York last week who committed suicide, an ER physician. And it's just so heartbreaking, because that's what she was doing, was dedicating herself to probably thousands of patients that she probably saved or helped, and yet it took this toll on her. And so I think we are probably going to be seeing more of that. And so it's certainly a concern. So I think, it's great that you're asking about this and kind of highlighting that risk.
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. And Roy, I know that part of your practice also involves meditation and, trying to use alternative ways to take care of yourself. So yeah. I'm sure that this is something that's going to be a bigger issue as this continues and then the aftermath of this crisis, people are going to really need to kind of work on their mental health.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. I've been doing these COVID updates on Facebook and Instagram, and people have been really finding a lot of benefit. And all of it is integrative. It's integrative stuff, spiritual approaches, mental approaches, emotional approaches. And I really think, especially for people listening and watching now, it is traumatic. Everybody, there's a lot of minimization, especially on Facebook. You have a pressure to post only positive things. If you post something negative, then you're looked at, looked at differently. And what I was saying to people is like, a lot of this stuff can be processed using a journal, connecting and actually using expressive exercises, even dancing. Dancing's really good. It's very simple. Just put on your favorite song and just get going. And then meditation, of course, is a way where you're turning inside and finding peace, whether it's a Zen form meditation or a concentration-based meditation like I do. All those are really helpful, but really it's about processing whatever traumas you've had from it. And that's a strong word to use. Some people are like, oh, it's not a war. You'll hear a lot of people say it's not a war, calm down, you're just inside. But actually you've lost a lot of things. You've
Yep.
lost a lot of things. No matter what your loss has been, there has been losses. And to pretend to minimize, if someone's minimizing you, that means they're minimizing themselves. So that doesn't mean you need to minimize yourself because someone's going to criticize your experience. It's more about just putting it out there, expressing it to people who are close to you that you can be safe with. A journal is always super safe, and then dance. These things are really important. It doesn't just have to be meditation. It can be whatever way you express it.
Absolutely. I think we all have our own coping mechanisms, whatever that might be. And whether right or wrong, if it works for you, then it works for you. So,
Exactly.
listen, guys, I would be able to talk to you guys for hours. This is what I do. I'm a journalist. I have so many questions, but unfortunately we don't have enough time. But I so appreciate the fact that you have dedicated your lives to helping others, and you are sacrificing a lot to help others get through this. And so thank you for your work. Thank you for your sacrifice. And it's fantastic that you're both supporters of the arts and in the arts. So I think that's great too. So thank you from that perspective. So guys, take care of yourselves, and thanks for your time, really.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on, May.
All right,
Thanks
well,
so much.
back to you.
We are back. Thank you, May, as well as Roy and Meena, for all of the information, as well as all of the work that you are doing. It is such a privilege to have so many members of our community who are out there, who are really helping and saving lives in all different ways. So thank you both. So now I want to turn things over to 5 of what I would say are the leading faces, leading Asian American faces in comedy. Amy Hill, Suzy Nakamura, Harry Kondabalu, Randall Park, and Margaret Cho. We are going to have a conversation with them about what their experiences have been, and I'm going to first welcome everyone on here.
Okay.
I said I didn't say Hari.
No, that's okay. We're here now.
Okay. All right. I just hate that when people call me Army.
So I'm going to introduce our illustrious panel, who really needs no introduction, but I will start with the wonderful Amy Hill. Amy Hill is an American stand-up comedian, actress, voiceover actress. She pioneered the subgenre of Asian American female solo shows with Tokyo Bound. She and Margaret were on All American Girl, and she can currently be seen in Magnum PI. And then I really wanted to focus on weird things in all of your lives. So Amy, you were in The Cat in the Hat.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Well, oh God, I hate to say it, but that was one of the most miserable times of my life. I thought it was going to be fantastic, but I had 2 weeks of stunt training. And while I'm being trained to do all these great stunts, I'm like, who's my stunt double? I keep looking around at all the stunt people, and I think maybe that guy's going to be mine. And they said, no, you don't have you do your own stunts. And I'm like, why didn't I ask for more money? they could never have hired anybody who could do all the shit that I had to do.
What did you have to do?
Yeah.
So I had to fall from the ceiling. I had to go on a spinning thing while they were doing, I had to spin. Then they said, oh, Amy, you're better than J-Lo. I had to spin in the air. I had to go down these things and I had to land and I did a lot. And then I had to be carried into a closet like on a coat hanger. I mean, I did a lot of physical stuff.
That sounds illegal. Like,
right?
Why didn't they get you a stunt? What was their reasoning for not having a stunt person?
They were cheap. I mean, I was like, I felt like I was expendable because they also paid more money for I had to go in and make a whole double of me, go into one of those places and they made like a whole bunch of me, like they did. I was in one of those forms and then they shot like, rubber in. And so all around the set, you'd see me, my character laying on the floor or my face my head on a stake while they're doing makeup.
oh, wow.
And that thing cost more than my salary. I was so cheap because I was so excited.
I like that. So were you also J-Lo's understudy for Hustlers? Was that also?
I should have been. I would have, then I'd have to have a stunt double. But I was.
I also
it
like
was,
that
it was a nightmare.
About landing, that you were fine falling, but not landing. That was
barely. No. So one time I landed, it was like off a bit. So I actually did land. Like I fell from the ceiling and But because I'm that Asian girl who goes, oh, it's okay. No, I'm fine.
Oh no.
I think it's totally
Are you like a Seuss character? What is
No, there was no babysitter in Dr. The Cat in the Hat. So they created my character, just like on Magnum. There's no, Kumu. So they created it. So I still don't know who I am really on this show.
Yeah.
But
that's all right.
It's okay.
It's good.
I figure out in my head and then they change it.
It's perfect.
Like they'll go, oh, and you have an ex-husband who died and who, had an affair and you have and you're like, oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
I'll work that in.
Thank you. I'm going to keep going clockwise. Welcome, Amy.
Good.
I'm going to go to Suzy. Suzy Nakamura is a actress. She's originally actress and improv comedian from Chicago, which she's always very proud about. And used to work with Second City. She has done many new TV shows, but she's most well known for her character on Dr. Ken, and she's currently in Avenue 5. I also found out you used to work at Crate and Barrel.
Yes. For a long time.
For a long time?
Yeah.
How long did you work there?
Oh, well, I mean, I was there for a couple of years and then I left to become an actress. I got a tour and they had a goodbye party for me and it was a big deal and they made a t-shirt and then I lasted maybe 6 months and I had to come crawling back.
And they welcomed you with open arms.
They welcomed me, yeah. I
Did
worked
you go on the sales floor? What did you do at Crate and Barrel?
I worked in the stock room. I stocked shelves and then I went on the floor as a salesperson. I know a lot about ceramics. If anyone here has any questions, also glassware.
Great, welcome. And next we have Hari Kondabalu. Hari is a stand-up comedian based out of New York. He had the documentary The Problem with Apu on True TV, as well as worked on Politically Reactive. Was that the show with W. Camus Bell?
Yeah, that's the podcast come out I had, and his show Totally Bites before that.
And totally. And then currently, recently, you had a Netflix special, Tell Your Relatives.
Warn your relatives.
Warn your relatives. I got all of my research right there.
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine.
Welcome. And then, you have a master's from the London School of Economics. So you have a backup job, career. Suzy also has one at Crate and Barrel. But yours is...
No, I wasted a lot of money before I decided to do this.
Welcome. And then next we have Margaret. So Margaret Cho is a stand-up comedian, actress, fashion designer, author, singer-songwriter. You are best known for many, many things, including your TV show All American Girl that Amy was on, also your reality TV show, which I downloaded for $7 on iTunes and watched at an airport in one sitting.
Wow, that's great.
It was really,
That's
it got
great.
me through a layover. And
Amazing.
you're also on Sharknado 5 Global Swarming.
Yes, I am. That's right.
And did you need a stunt double for that?
No, and we did it on a beach, but it wasn't even a beach. We didn't even have water. It was all CGI. There was no shark, but I mean, it wasn't a shark. It was a shark. It's an actual sharknado that you have to act as if it's a shark. That's a lot of sharks that turns into a tornado that is taking over. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
A lot of acting.
Very much acting. It's a lot of acting.
And did you do like any research about Sharknado? You know, like do you have a fear of water or anything like that?
No, I guess no, but I did hang out with Tara Reid once in the lobby of a Hilton in Stockholm, where we were in. We couldn't leave because outside the hotel there was. We were there with a boy band, and there was 300 Swedish girls crying outside, waiting for them, and we couldn't leave because they were blocking us in. They were like crying and screaming, waiting for this boy band, but we were like sucked in with them, and we couldn't get out, and we couldn't move. So we were like trapped, and so we just were sitting there. So just me and Tara Reid. So she said I could be in Sharknado. I was trapped. So that it was like this screaming girl sort of became the Sharknado metaphor. It was very Swedish and very. It was like a. I don't know. It was this. I guess it was sort of. Yeah, it was a deal that she made with me. White people are all right sometimes.
Teen NATO.
Yeah, it was like a white. Well, white people do things for each other. I realize when they're really under threat.
You were also in a short film called Thugs, a musical?
That's right. With Kevin Avery, another, he was a writer for W. Kamau Bell's show with Hari, and Kamau was in that as well. And who else was in that? That was a lot of people from your guys' show.
Baron Vaughn.
Yeah, Baron Vaughn. Baron Vaughn and I went on a date once in 2012, and we never broke up. So technically we're still dating. It's my longest relationship. He's married and has children and stuff, but we never broke up. So we're still going out. As far as I'm concerned, we're still going out. I hold on to my ties.
Yeah.
Take them real seriously.
You're loyal.
I am.
Yeah.
And finally, we have Randall Park. Randall Park, who's a comedian and writer. He is known for his portrayal of Kim Jong-un in the 2014 film The Interview. And then he's even more well known for his role of Louis Huang in Fresh Off the Boat, which ran for 6 seasons and it recently came to an end. I know you've taped the final episode. Has it aired?
Yeah. We're done.
You're done. And you were in an MTV show called Wild and Out.
Yes, with Nick Cannon. It was. It's still going on to this day. It is kind of like a Whose Line Is It Anyways for the kids.
I just remember The Grind, and that's all I saw you on. You know that show where they had people dancing.
Yes.
MTV.
Yeah.
Just
did you say that's where I saw you on?
That's what I thought. That's why I thought Wild and Out was like maybe a version of that.
Oh no, I was never on The Grind.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
If you said you were on The Grind, how would anybody know? You have to go through all the tapes to prove it.
I don't know. I'd probably spot the Asian guy in The Grind.
And you also worked at Starbucks.
I did, yes. Actually, while I was in Wild and Out, I worked at Starbucks. yeah, it was an interesting time because Wild and Out was on the air, and I needed money because MTV pays what they pay. And I got a job at Starbucks, and it turned out to be this amazing job. I loved it. I was there for a few years.
Which Starbucks?
The one in well, two of them. I worked on the one in the Pacific Palisades.
Oh.
And then I worked at the one on 26th and Santa Monica.
Oh.
It was a new one that had just opened. It's still there. Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. So we want to break the conversation up into three parts. One of it is that we wanted to bring you all into the conversation in that Amy and Margaret, you were part of All American Girl, and then we had this 25-year period before we had kind of the last few years where we've had Fresh Off the Boat. We've had the rise in the visibility of Asian American artists through Netflix and streaming and Hulu. And in between Hari, we had basically The Simpsons and Apu as our kind of Asian American touchstone. So I wanted to kind of talk about where we are in this moment. But before we do that, I just want to see how everyone, I just read an article. I'm not supposed to ask you how you're doing in the pandemic. I'm supposed to ask you, what are we interrupting? So what are you doing, in this time of lockdown and quarantine?
I was just sitting here. So I'm still in stride right now. Well,
It's like every day there's some kind of weird, like, why is it an Asian murder hornet? Why does it have to be an Asian something? Like, is it like some sort of thing where is this sort of kind of, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there seems to be this pattern of everything that's sort of deadly seems to be emerging from Asia, or there's some kind of like Asian component to it, and it's very upsetting. Like, it's difficult to kind of translate what that's about, and it's why does this keep coming back up? And this idea of rejecting racism towards Asian Americans, even in a place like that, it is as Asian American as Los Angeles, which it's hard to believe that people would even try to be racist against Asian Americans in LA, but it's happening, and it's a very difficult situation to come to terms with.
Yeah, one of the questions I actually had later on, which I'll ask now, is, how do all of you who have done stand-up or live performance, how have you dealt with hecklers? Hari, I just heard an interview where you talked a little bit about this, in that when we see things now, the reality of it is, I just experienced something a few weeks ago in Little Tokyo, and the thing was, you tell yourself, I'm going to step in and I'm going to interrupt it, or I'm going to say something. But when you're in the moment, it actually takes you a second to kind of catch up to what's happening, right? That you're in a little bit of like, wait, did this person just say that? And then you're like, okay, wait, do I pull my phone out? Do I yell at this person? Do I grab, like you're trying, and then in
what
that
happened
moment,
in Little Tokyo?
There was a little bit of an incident in Ninjaya, one of the stores, where a man started to yell at one of the cashiers. He was really unhappy with, I think, the price of something, and he, it was a lot of like, go back to where you came from, all this.
In Little Tokyo?
In Little Tokyo.
And that's an Asian grocery store.
It's an Asian grocery store.
And it's probably like mostly Asian people around, is my guess.
Yes. I mean, I think what we're seeing is there is no place is immune, right? So that in Los Angeles and in Southern California, we've seen a significant rise, but it's everywhere. And I think, lately the theater has been targeted in numerous ways. There's been some right-wing bloggers that have attacked us and the work and things like that. So it just it's very eye-opening, as are some of the other institutions that have been, threatened in various ways. So I think I kept thinking about, well, how do some of you manage hecklers? And is that, what is the way when you're in that situation that you didn't think you would be in, even here in LA or in New York or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that you would have to just deal with in the moment. And in general, I think that we all would present such a united front, especially with an audience there, that you would not see that at a show. Like, you wouldn't see it. I think we are also intimidating when, we're there full force in our sort of like showroom with the microphone, with the audience there with us, you're not going to get a heckler that is going to be racist. That's just not going to happen. And if they are, we'll be able to shut them down really quickly. I think just because the audience is going to be in our favor, it doesn't happen. I think that the only occasion where that would occur would be in something that we're like maybe not in our element. Maybe if I would do like, I don't know why I would appear on the Alex Jones show, but if I had to,
Don't do it.
You do it.
reason,
Hey, work is work.
so I might have to. But there may be some occasion where that might happen. But so there's some point of where you're in a different context. Then I would say you would have to sort of do some kind of assault where you're trying to come at it with humor that maybe would apply to everyone. I mean, my answer is this: like, if you're going to be racist against Asian people, just try to remember that when you're sick with the with that Rona, when you go to the emergency room, your doctor is probably going to be an Asian. And you're going to have to be intubated by that Asian. And you're going to have to face that racism down. You're going to have to swallow that racism so that you can get that tube in, And I think that that's the reality check is really to point out the humanity of the fact that your racism is going to have to like let up when we deal with the humanity of this disease.
Yeah.
I feel like when I started, I think I dealt with it more. Once you get to a point where you build enough of a following where they're there to see you, it would be very foolish for someone to heckle in that situation in a way that is racist, because they're so outnumbered. I don't think racists like that. They draw their whole strength from having numbers. So
Right.
It used to happen a lot more before, like, when people would just stumble into a comedy club to see who's headlining that night. In those situations, I think it's more likely to happen. But even now, I feel like, and Margaret, you would know this better, but like, I feel like people know in those settings more than they would have before to keep their mouth shut and save their racism when it's more worthwhile for them.
Yeah.
As opposed to like when you're clearly outnumbered, people are filming things, you will lose your job. Like, this isn't going to be the time to do it, as opposed to like 10, 15, 20 years ago where it probably would have happened a lot more often.
Exactly.
And I think there's an important takeaway that when we see this type of behavior and we see this type of person, it's disheartening and it's depressing, but we have to remember they're the minority. They might be the loudest, they might be the most visible. There might be an article, I just read something, some guy wore a Klan hat to a grocery store.
Yeah.
And that's awful to see, obviously, but I mean, no one, I mean, he got kicked out, people complained, and so we have to remember they're the minority.
Crazy.
It also feels
so
like,
crazy.
when you give them any power by acknowledging it and being upset by it, you feel like they got what they wanted from that situation. So part of me is just like, walk away, not even give them any recognition, because you're not going to change their mind until they get COVID, and then they'll have to change their mind quick. But you're talking to you're talking to an empty void.
Yeah. I don't know. Whenever I go to the supermarket now, or a lot of places, I have my phone in my hand, like ready to, like, just in case.
Videotape.
Like,
yeah.
It's kind of like I don't know. I guess I've just been hit with such a huge barrage of these videos, and it's definitely gotten me infuriated and on edge to a degree. And so whenever I'm in a situation where I feel like, oh, okay, something like that could happen, I just want, I want to be ready to tape them,
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's a really good idea.
Snehal, did anyone say or do anything in the grocery store when you were there?
There was a security guard that came pretty quickly and then escorted the man. But it was that thing of like,
Yeah.
For me, it was before I did, and then you're like trying to think of a comeback, right? Besides like,
Yeah.
stop, right? Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes the incidents wrap up before then, or you know,
What was
but
the
it's
guy?
also the
What was the
thread
guy
again.
getting at the Japanese market? Is my like what my guess is he was getting like an Oyako don or like
Yeah.
some sort of like Japanese dish, and then he's like it's just so strange to me that this
It is
person,
very strange. But you know, I'm more likely to step in on a confrontation between other people. Like
Right.
if somebody says something to me, I'll be like, whatever. I mean, I might get upset, but I won't get involved. I won't confront somebody confronting me. But if somebody is getting into it with somebody else, I don't know why, but that makes me crazy.
right?
Because I always feel like they can't handle it, whoever that other person is that's being yelled at or something, which they probably could. But, you know, it's like, I think I'm more likely to get involved in those situations.
But that's what I think everybody should.
Yeah, everybody
try
should.
to be like that, you know. So
Yeah.
if something like that happens, we show them the numbers that they are not the
back
majority.
off, buddy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
What's your point?
I think we also, I mean, for Hurry and I mean, I also think then you're like bearded brown guy that's getting, you know what I mean, involved.
Right.
It was like, and again, it depends on where you are and what the situation is.
Right,
But,
exactly.
there's
And it's always a surprise if a woman, like especially me, an older woman steps in, they're like, what, huh? And I always come in like a mother because I am a mother. So I'll be like, hey, do you have a mother? Did your mother raise you that way? You know, and they'll always be like, what, hey, huh? Because I think they're ready to confront men. But I think when an older woman comes in and says, like, you know, do you think that's the way to treat people or something like that? They're like, oh, yeah, oh.
Well, they're suddenly shamed by women. Like if there's like a woman that comes in and it's suddenly they're really ashamed. And that's the power that women bring in, which is a good thing, you know, because suddenly then it is like they're confronted by their mothers, which I think is like the one advantage is like, you know, you can really put them in their place that way. Which is really good.
And it comes out that way for me because I think, how could you act that way?
Yeah.
Great. I want to shift a little bit towards your artistic journeys. Many of you started out by self-producing your work, right? So you were either independent producing or writing your work. And I'm still wondering if that you feel like is still the way for a lot of Asian American artists or artists of color to find their way. You know, some of you also did showcases. I know, Randall, I think you did the CBS Diversity Showcase. There's these kind of pipeline programs, which I have opinions for and against. I think they give an opportunity, but then they also segregate and silo us. So I think they have, you know, pros and cons to that. So, you know, what were the things that kind of both helped you, you know, refine your craft, but you think were you know, by going this route, it really helped move you to the next level or stage in your career?
Well, I think that I don't really have any, you know, other choice because, I mean, for like, what we just do is like stand-up comedy. So it's like, that's all of the things that I would, if I just did one thing, that's what I would do anyway. And then that's sort of what I look at all of my work is just stand-up comedy in different forms. So I would just say that's all it is. But I think that for diversity, it's really important to be able to write your own work and write your own shows. And, you know, that's the only way for, at least in our generation, to really get our names out there, because there wasn't anybody writing for us at that time, you know, like in the 80s. And like, there was like, before Amy, there was like Jude Narita. I think that was it.
That's right.
That was Amy, Jude. That was it.
Yeah.
Who was the guy? There's any guys doing
Dan Kwong.
Mm.
Oh no, there was some guy. I think there was people on the East Coast, but you know, the East Coast, West Coast was really separated.
Super far. I mean,
yeah,
there was David Henry Kwong was doing plays, but they were like that. And then there was, and BD was in plays with them. they were
Right.
doing stuff, but it wasn't only it was just Jude and you. That was it.
Well, I started in Asian American Theater Company in San Francisco, and we were only doing new work. So we were always writing from our experiences and giving our voice to our experience. So for me, that felt like the only way I could empower myself is to write my own material and do my own thing. I never intended to be a solo show, but somebody asked me if I had a solo show, and I said yes. And so then I just wrote it. So I never really had plans, but, you know, I loved improv. I loved, you know, and all those experiences I had in San Francisco led to me being able to create, which made me feel more powerful, because you always feel in the industry, especially, that, you know, they just look at you and think you don't fit whatever it is they want to put you in. The mold.
I think that's also the power of stand-up, just because,
right,
like, you're not waiting for someone else to write something for you when you're writing it yourself. It's direct, and, you know, it's hard to argue that you're doing it wrong when you're filling a room. When people are there to see it, there's no more of like, we don't know if this can sell, we don't know if this person, well, you know, I've sold out these many rooms, so clearly someone's liking it. And I think that the same is true, especially that there's so many like people in marginalized communities who've used the internet to create their own work. And it's very difficult to say this isn't going to sell when you have 1 million followers, when you're making money without the, I mean, I think about Lily Singh. Lily Singh made it herself, and then it's really NBC that needed her.
Right.
The other way around. She's bringing her following and her numbers and her fans to broadcast television. And I feel like it's still crucial that we own our work and we put it out and don't depend on other people making it, because ultimately I think it's always beneficial to be able to own your work versus someone else creating it for you. Like, you should be the executive producer, you should be the writer, you should be the person that has the control. Otherwise you're giving the power to someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Margaret. I mean, the renaissance that happened after All American Girl, it was so, because I knew Margaret, I didn't really know her, but I knew her work before, and her voice was so specific and unique. And then, you know, it was hard being in the business of Hollywood. And then after that show ended, to see her like a phoenix rise again and just do her stuff. I mean, it was like so amazing to watch. And that's like the point of everything, is to be able to own it, be authentic, follow your voice. And, you know, we all need to trust that that's going to work for us.
It's good to just learn, like, because before it was sort of like, oh, you do comedy to like break into TV. But then when TV is like terribly disappointing, you realize comedy is an end to itself. Then it's like the perfect job. So it really worked out very well.
Yeah.
I think the struggle for people, like for me, I've always worked for someone else. I've always worked for the men. I wrote one thing many, many years ago, but the struggle for me was, what is my voice? Because, you know, for so long we watched, you know, television and we watched movies, and it was always someone else's story. And when you grow up in the United States, you grow up in an environment, or you grow up in a neighborhood, you don't even know what your own voice is.
Right.
And so I think the important part with creating your own material is knowing what that is, whether you do stand up or your own stuff, or even if you do scripted material, because you can bring something of that to any role that is, you know, and I think it's the same for a lot of artists of color. When you're hired for a scripted show, you know, it was most likely a lot of times written for someone else. And so when you get the job, you have to bring your own unique take and voice to it. And to do that, you need to know what it is first.
Right.
Yeah, I think for me, when I started a little late, and I did everything. I mean, I did all those showcases. I did probably every network showcase, but I made sure to write whatever I was in. Like I was like, I'm gonna write, instead of doing like another person's scene, I'm gonna write the scene that I'm in. And then I did stand up, did improv, did theater, made my own videos. That's how I met Hari many years ago. And just kind of, but for me, I think the foundation was always writing and just, kind of doing it on my own, and just keeping at it. And I think I don't think any of it kind of like directly helped me or led to my show, like Lily Singh or Issa Rae, how their kind of web stuff led directly to their things. But I think there was a definite indirect connection to all of that and to where I got to and where I'm headed.
What I loved about Randall's stuff when I watched it was that the characters he was creating were like the shows that he was making in these like 5-7 minute formats had such a broad range of different people of color playing parts they wouldn't normally play. So when you watched like the stuff he was creating and writing and directing and producing, it was like, oh, this is like what the world could be if they let us play the range of stuff that he was creating. Like, an Asian dude playing a Jewish doctor, but no makeup, nothing's different, like a black dude playing an Asian manager of a Starbucks, but nothing about him is different. Like there's no cost. It's just, he creates the possibility of like, why can't we play anything and do our interpretation of things without?
I was very conscious of that. Like I just didn't want to like, I wanted to write shows that were like the shows we saw on TV, but I didn't want to put any white people like in those roles, unless they were friends. Unless they were like friends, then I'd put them in. But yeah, and that was the world I wanted to see.
I also like that many of the white roles weren't particularly good parts.
Yeah, that was that was definitely a part of the plan.
Was it? You know what I find here, though, for me, because I've lived on the mainland most of my life, like the last 60 some years of my life, is that here I'm constantly going, they don't look, I mean, nobody even blinks an eye. They don't, nobody ever asks me, what am I? Ever. Nobody, because here it's such a mishmash. Somebody named, Johnson looks Asian, or somebody named Tanaka looks white. I mean, it's like all of your preconceived notions of what the name and the character and everything is all gone. So I'm learning to see people in a different way as well, living here. So now maybe I should write that show where it's like I'm going, what? Yeah. It's all constant, every day, busting every stereotype.
That's really
but
cool.
we have to unlearn what we've been
That's
taught.
what I'm saying. Yeah, I thought, oh, that was one of my shows in the early 90s, my childhood. I thought I was other, and then I realized I saw other people as other. Anyway, but yeah, so that's something that I'm kind of every day thinking about.
I have two things off of that. One, Amy, I mean, the thing that I always think about with you, I mean, the big thing is, and I briefly acted and I no longer do it because I'm bad at it, but when I would go out, everything asked for an accent, right? Everything was about like, you know what I mean? And it was like, you're brown miscellaneous, so I would get called, you could be Palestinian, you could be South Asian, you could be, Middle Eastern, and they would always ask for an accent. And it was always, from when you're starting out, I kind of was like, I'll just go out for everything. And then there certainly became a point where you're like, no, I actually don't want to. And I know, Amy, you've spoken a lot about this. Do you, is that something you're still seeing and having to kind of challenge or push back against or make a decision about when the opportunities that you're afforded are kind of these more stereotypical things, if you will?
Well, I found that I don't normally, have the opportunity to do an accent. I'm playing a Hawaiian person now, and of course I know a lot of Hawaiian people have no accent at all, but then they can flop into that pidgin thing. So I've created my own soft Hawaiian kind of thing, but I'm looking for the time when I'm going to get to talk to my, like my cousin and be able to speak in a pidgin accent. But, I haven't had that chance. I'm, whatever. But my mother, I was raised with a mother who was really like Margaret's mother, super proud of being Japanese and had the thickest accent ever. So, my childhood was horrified by her. And then when I got the opportunity to be somebody, like I did it in improv all the time, I did my mother. And then when I was on Margaret's show, I got to be the grandma, but I used my mother's core sensibility as a human to be the core of that character. And then, the accents and all of those other things, those were specific to Korean as much as I could. But, I felt like if I can create a human that's multifaceted, that's just one layer of who they are. So like on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I played a Filipina, and I was thrilled to be able to do a Filipina mom because, I'd done that in improv, I'd done it in theater. When I was doing Asian American Theater Company, I did Filipinas, all kinds of people. So I was already down for that. But I consciously know that I want to keep it not too heavy because I don't want the issue of I don't understand what she's saying. I don't, there's a part of me that is concerned that I'm going to become too foreign for the mainstream. So, although on Margaret's show, I kind of let myself go.
Well, it's really about nuance, when in your portrayal of the grandmother there, it's less about, I notice less the accent and more the enhanced femininity and a kind of femininity and womanliness that's like learned from watching movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like actually like this kind of woman that's from watching like, Elizabeth Taylor and like, like it's a very like 1950s womanness that you didn't get from other Korean women,
right?
That you got from watching the screen. And it's like, that's the way that my mother got it. That's the way that her friends got it, because they didn't want to be like the women in Korea.
That's right.
It's a very, very particular kind of womanness that, so their English is as good as it can be, but it's like definitely there's an accent there, but it's as American as they can be.
Right.
So it's not like, it's like there's not the foreignness there. It's like they're trying to pronounce it as much as they can. And it's not pidgin English to them at all.
No.
Yeah, when you get a script nowadays, it's like you can tell when the accent is the joke, like
it's
you can,
and
like sometimes they'll literally write it out in the.
If I think the accent, or even, if I'm a sight gag, if I'm a accent, if I'm a, walking, talking, whatever gag, then I just say no, because it's not worth it.
I mean, the good thing about now is that when there are almost always, but there's still exceptions, but usually when there are people of color in regular regular roles, they'll make it a priority to try to find writer who can spot that BS,
right,
and who'll be quick to correct that. And I think that that's a good thing, and hopefully will continue.
Yeah, and sometimes I want to create a character, and they'll say no accent, and I'll be like, well, why? I mean, why is it wrong? This is an immigrant woman from Taiwan, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I have a whole bunch of people in my file of people that I know growing up and that I want to use. They're real people anyway. But because I don't like television to be whitewashed either. Whitewashed in terms of people of color
Right.
playing white people. You know
Right.
what I mean? Yeah.
What do you? A lot of you have dealt with intersectionality in your work. So, Margaret, you know, in terms of whether it's gender identity or gender, or Amy talking about being Hapa, you know, and a lot of what we talk about is that no one checks off any one box in their life, and we don't prioritize being Asian over our gender, over our sexual orientation. So, how are you? How have you? What are challenges you've encountered about bringing your whole self into a room or space? Or pushing the needle forward that people of color also can be gay, can also have a disability, can also talk about mental health, you know, in terms of issues. That's what I feel like at East West, we've really tried to move the needle on, and oftentimes, you know, not found the work yet there dealing with those topics, or found challenges with the community being receptive to a conversation about those things.
Oh, there's still resistance there. I mean, I think that there is definitely more of a desire for a conversation, but I mean, there just needs to be more of a sense of inclusion. I mean, and also even like within the space of queerness, like it's hard to, even for people, even like within the gay community, even understand like bisexuality. Like if people understand like being gay and being straight, or
Right.
being a lesbian and being gay, but being bisexual, which I am, is very hard for people to kind of understand, you know, that is a difficult place. Or even being trans is hard for people, or even being like gender fluid, or you know, the sort of different conversations around gender are like all that's very much emerging. So but it's a better place that we've been in, I mean, now more than ever, certainly.
And I think that can be applied for all, like a lot of outsider communities, is that it's not binary. It's always a spectrum, right? If I have this face, but this face could be an immigrant story, it can be a fourth generation story.
Right.
And I think what we're trying to move away from was that this face only means one thing, you know?
Right.
And so if we can present universal stories where any outsider community can identify with the spectrum of queerness,
Right.
or the spectrum of gender, or the spectrum of, you know, any sort of identity, then I think that's where the good stories are going to come from. That it's specific, but also universal.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the things that I find incredibly disappointing about so much TV and film, because you see so many plots being recycled or recreating the same things over and over again. And it's like, when you think about the combination of identities a single human being has, the variety of experiences, the different things that make a person completely unique from another human being, we shouldn't ever be repeating stories.
Right.
No, it's
just
amazing to me.
That's who we are.
Yeah. I mean, just when I was doing my solo shows traveling around, I'm sure you have this experience, all of you, that you sit down and talk to somebody and they go, oh my God, that was my story. And I'm like, oh, you know, okay. And then they say their story and you think, well, your story's way better than my story. Why don't you write that story? You know, I mean, just scratching the surface. That's why StoryCorps, that thing that is just fascinating. I listen to people's stories and I think, God, why isn't that a movie? But, you know, I guess there are no things blowing up or crazy. I don't know. Just stories fascinate me. People fascinate me.
How are you all responding to this time? You know, or how do you hope the community is responding now, or when we get on the other side? So I guess, where are you in terms of, where are you thinking in terms of your work, or the community, you know, while we're in the midst of it? And some of it might be, you might not be, you might just be wanting to get to the other side. But, you know, artistically, some folks thrive, you know, in times of pressure, and other folks just, you know, need a little space. But I just want to, what you guys are working on or doing or thinking about.
I think that like this sort of drive to like productivity is really I don't know, it's a strange thing about Hollywood and about like art, and this need, like everybody that I know is like driven to be productive and really anxious about it, and I don't, and they're sort of like, everybody sort of recites their like tally of things that they've done and they've written, and I really don't. I have no plans to start sourdough starter. I have no yeast. I don't care. I mean, I'm like not doing shit. Like, I really don't care. And I think it's a very weird thing because, and it's like my parents are like, well, you have to do so. You have to do so many things. You have to do this and this and like they're just like really trying to egg me on to be productive, and I'm like, I'm not doing shit. Like it's really kind of crazy. Like I'm kind of going Asian crazy, like doing nothing. I'm not even binging TV. I'm not doing anything. And
but does it feel good? Does it feel
good?
Good? Because I think we're all like a little bit of a workaholic, but now we have permission to not work. Because in any other circumstance, I think we would feel bad about not working. But if you can't work, then I mean, for the first time, I feel okay with not working.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting. I'm not even like working out or anything. I'm like really excited.
Yes. Like, if you can't enjoy this on some level, despite the tragedy of what's, the reason that we can't work.
Yeah.
Like, when are we gonna, it's basically the universe forced us to stop. And honestly, for me, I had to, had to.
Yeah. I love being alone, but I'm starting to get anxious about going back in the world. Like when they lift the restrictions, I'm like, fuck, I got nothing done.
You don't have to.
Then I'm gonna look back. I know. That's my anxiety is about when it's gonna open and they're gonna say, so did you write that book? Did you write that play? Did you do that thing?
No one wrote King Lear. Don't worry about it.
I did nothing. Nobody's gonna care.
Who are you listening to? We want to take this opportunity to lift up any artists that, any comics, any musicians, anyone you're listening to, watching, or not at all. But
Mitski, all Mitski all the time.
I've got that on my list. I'm reading Overstory. And nobody's heard of it. It's okay.
Overstory.
I guess it was a fancy book. I mean, it was it's kind of a mythical, goes over time. It includes trees and everything, and it's like these stories of different people. Huh?
I remember trees.
Yeah, there were trees. There were trees at one point in our lives.
What a
anyway, I'm reading
walk
more.
back that story's gonna be. There's a book called Station 11 about, I think, a global pandemic, which I'm just not in a mood to read.
In the beginning, though, I watched that pandemic series on Netflix. That was kind of fun. Yeah.
I do not want to see anything about a pandemic.
No, the very beginning, because I was just intrigued by it all. Now I'm not doing anything.
Dwayne Kennedy released a record that I produced with W. Kamau Bell and my friend Aham Oluo. And Dwayne Kennedy's this incredible stand-up comic who's never released a full-length album until last week. So that is something that
Dwayne Kennedy, I'm going to get that.
Oh, it's so good. It's called Who the Hell is Dwayne Kennedy?
Dwayne Kennedy. See,
Yeah,
I've got a long list of things to do.
I love him. I think he's
great.
I never even heard of him. I don't know anything.
Well,
but it's okay.
I
give myself permission to not know stuff.
Yes, you're in paradise. Relax.
Thank you. Okay.
I've been watching disaster flicks, and I watched Day After Tomorrow, but I guess, and then Tamlin's in it, so I hope she survived. That's all I know, is like Tamlin's like one of the scientists, but I don't know where it ended up. And then it took me to this movie Velociraptor, which is about a Velocipastor. It's about a pastor who's a Velociraptor.
No, I would never imagine you would watch stuff like that.
It's like bad improv scenes turned into films.
That sounds really good.
I've been watching a lot. And I've never had any interest in Korean dramas before this pandemic. And I've been watching Korean dramas, and I see why they're so popular around the world.
They're so
good.
good.
A series or a movie?
A series. There's this one called Itaewon Class that we just finished, and it's so good. And I'm like, oh, I get it.
And how do you watch it?
on a couch.
No,
like,
I mean like.
Oh no, which do you watch it on Viki or do you watch
Netflix.
it on
That's on Netflix.
On Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a
Okay,
bunch of great ones
Spell
on
it. Spell it.
Itaewon, Itaewon, I think, class. It's so good.
And you're also a K-pop fan, Randall. Did you watch I think there was like a 40-hour BTS marathon.
I'm a BTS fan. I wouldn't say I'm a K-pop fan, but my wife is a huge K-pop fan and a huge BTS fan. So
Tell her I said hi, please.
I will.
Yeah,
I will.
hi.
I will. So I'm sure she caught a lot of that.
Last question, and then first of all, Amy, it's your birthday on Saturday.
Yes.
Yay!
Happy birthday.
Birthday, baby.
Happy
I was
birthday.
going to be in New York watching theater. Oh, well.
There was something you know now that you wish you had known 20 or 30 years ago or earlier. What would that be? So if you think back to your Starbucks Crate and Barrel days, is there something you know now that you wish you would have, or you would tell yourself?
I would say I'm enough. I never ever thought I was okay. I mean, I'm kind of thinking I'm okay now, but it would be something I would tell my younger self, relax, you are enough.
And I would definitely say that, but I would also say that I'm capable and that I'm valid, whether that means personally or professionally. I feel like I've held myself back in so many ways thinking
Right.
I'm not good enough. Nobody wants to hear my ideas. I haven't done this long enough. What do I know about this? And it's like a good decade where I could have been creating stuff. And it's like, what am I
Wait
doing?
until I'm going to be 67 on Saturday. So I'm like already
Wow,
going,
that's great.
Do I have to get shit done?
I think I put my job before so many things when I was first starting. And it's good to make it a priority, but I thought it was my life too many times. And so I would tell my younger self, it's your job, but it's not your life.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, I would have said, I'd say probably just say yes to things more and just, there were a lot of times when like friends would ask me, hey, let's go on this trip or let's do this and let's do that. And I was just like, I just want to stay in bed, And and I think it's nice to stay in bed and it's good to stay in bed, but I wish I would have, just kind of experienced things a little more while I was younger.
Well, thank you all so very, very much for joining us today. I think the main thing I wanted is to have a conversation that was fun and hopefully people leave inspired.
Love you.
So nice to meet you, Hari.
See all of you.
Love you.
I'm gonna binge watch you some more and watch Dwayne or listen to Dwayne Kennedy.
Oh, Dwayne Kennedy's great.
Thank you all again so much for joining us. I want to thank everyone who was involved with today's show. Thank May, Roy, Meena, as well as our 5 panelists for joining us today. We hope you will tune in next Wednesday for our next East West Wednesdays. Also, we had a phenomenal Crazy Talented Asians, our second stay-at-home edition on Sunday. If you missed that show, you can find it on our Facebook page. So we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you for all of your support. Be safe and well.